those reels that are coming out, like, this is me as a stud, and this is me as a femme. And I'm like, how the fuck is that the same person? And people will also be bugged out. But I'm like, that's queerness, baby. Like, that's just, you just get that permission in those passes to be like, you get to look like a hobo today, and then tomorrow you look like a cupcake, and then the next day you're like a fucking unicorn thing.
Hey, I'm here with Petra. We're very excited. So Petra Vega has been on my show before. Mm-hmm. We talked about how trauma is like tangled up Christmas lights. Yeah. It was a very good metaphor.
That was a good one.
Mm-hmm. It was delightful. Mm-hmm. And today we are talking about, for Pride Month, how queerness saved us. Mm-hmm. So, Petra, tell us a little bit about you, your background, what you do, all your magical stuff.
Yeah. So my name is Petra Vega. I am on Muncie Lenape land in New York City. I describe my work as liberatory leadership. So really for folks who want to identify as leaders or are leaders, but feel really constricted by traditional definitions of leadership, and how to create more freedom and authenticity and self-trust through that. And so that's my jam. That's my work. That's what I'm here to do.
No big deal. Just liberating our unnuanced view of leadership in a capitalist hellscape. Okay, so doing the Lord's work, I see. For Pride Month, I have brought on a few different queer experts of various areas, and I wanted to bring you back on the show.
Yeah.
So let's talk about queerness.
What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you?
So queerness to me is like anything that is abnormal according to the norms, right? So like, I love a queer platonic relationship where we mess with what it means to be platonic. Mm-hmm. Like, I strongly identify with the concept of being genderqueer because like some days, like I get that I am shaped in such a way that people are going to be like, that's a woman. And like, that doesn't upset me because I understand that we have been raised in this paradigm that's like, well, women look like this and men look like this. But other times I'm very much like, no, I just simply wish to like ascend to another plane of being and like leave gender presentation and the binary behind. So genderqueer is where it's at for me. And then I also love queer as like a sexuality descriptor because I identify as bisexual, but saying like, I'm not binary and bisexual and like yada, yada, yada. I'm just like, I'm queer. I'm just queer the whole way down. It doesn't have to be a weird thing. So that's what queerness is to me, is queerness is everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's like the umbrella. It's and the umbrella and the like, the more metaphors, right? That the umbrella was like, there's a storm, but like we all fit in this little umbrella. And like, I love thinking of queerness in that way. Mm-hmm. I also like the queers and fuck you. They're just like, fuck you to everything, to tradition, to neurotypical ways of understanding things. And in the like, fuck you and fuck that. Like whatever you thought before, that queerness has taught me so much about how quickly we can change things if we just want it to, right? And how I think good other queer people are around just being like, okay, cool. So you're a B now? You're like, yeah. I'm like, great. We're B now. Okay, cool. Yeah. And that's it. Versus I think some people just have a really hard time with change and the swiftness of it. But there's something about queerness. It's like, even as like queerness is like, here's an identity that I'm using to kind of ground myself. It's also like not really a grounding into, right? Because like, it's just right now in this moment and it can become something else later. And I love that about that.
Yes. So that goes into like the idea that sexuality is a phase or this gender stuff is a phase. And it's like, okay, so what if it's a phase? Like we are allowed to explore and change the way we conceptualize ourselves, present ourselves to the world. Like I've changed careers 1,000 times and nobody's like, so marketing was a phase.
Yeah.
So higher education was a phase. Man, I just am living a life. Like I'm a human being.
Mm-hmm. I'm alive and awake in the world, right? And that I'm coming into contact with other people who are alive and awake. And what a blessing it is to be like changed by other people, right? That I know for me that I've always felt queer, but it wasn't until I saw like examples of other queerness that I was like, we can do that? Wait a minute. We can do that. We can love like that. And we can like dress this way and be described this way, then I was like, there's something in me. But again, that's the power of language, which I feel like queerness is also so good about that. There's so many ways to describe some shit.
I do. There's so many ways to describe some shit.
You're like the word witch, right?
Yes. No, but that's perfection. There is so many ways to describe some shit. Mm-hmm. I honestly, Petra, one of my like go-to phrases is like, I don't know shit about fuck. And I'd say that like when it comes to queerness, like when it comes to things that are like so vast that I couldn't possibly seek to understand all of it. Mm-hmm. And so like sometimes I will just take an edible and get attuned with myself and my place in the universe. And I'm just like, I know nothing. And like in knowing that I know nothing, I kind of know everything. So this is going to be a really weird episode. I'm so excited already. I'm so excited.
Which makes it very queer. It's already queer.
Yes, it's the queerest episode that I have done. Yeah, it's like that guy, there's a video and some dude, an older man at a pride parade, and they're like, how many genders are there? And he goes, I don't know, I just got here.
Hello.
Gorgeous. That's exactly what like queerness can mean.
Yeah.
It's just like, I am open to the idea that my current belief system, my current level of knowledge is incomplete.
Yeah.
And I really don't understand people who are like so pissed at the idea that maybe they do not have complete and total knowledge. They're like, no, it's penis and vagina. It's just two, boy and girl. Otherwise, I'm angry. And I'm like, what does it hurt for you to expand your concept a little?
Yeah. Ooh, I was just talking to my friend about this and how one of the places that we like came to is that the reason that there's can be so much girl around it, right? That is if you put your whole idea of yourself or the world on this binary, whatever the binary is, like, right, we're talking about sexuality, there's like gender here, there's like identity stuff. And if you're so involved with it, that if anyone else or anything else comes and tries to shake that up, then you can lose your sense of self, right? But I think for queer people, it's had the opposite effect on us. It was like, I felt so shackled by the black and white, by the binary, that even understanding or even coming across the idea that there could be so many is so freeing. But like for other people that they're like, I only understand the world this way. And how dare you try to interrupt that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's why a lot of neurodivergent people also are queer or genderqueer, because when you're autistic, there's very much a sense of being like, well, that rule is arbitrary and makes no sense. So like,
ridiculous.
No, thank you. I don't need that in order to function. Yeah. So like, no, thank you. I will not be operating within your gender binary, your we must handshake, your whatever the social norm is.
Yeah, your norms.
And that's why there's a lot of simultaneously queer and neurodivergent and non-binary and polyamorous, like, and all of these things that go outside the norm.
Yeah, I think the other piece too is just like that we've been all sold this thing around that there is a right way to be or like a perfect norm to things. And if we're not operating or embodying that perfect norm, that no one will love us. And queerness is such the evidence of like, no. Just like be who you are, be more of who you are, because that allows me to be more of who I am. And like, again, it just like, it puts into question this idea around the perfection thing, right? Which like I work with lots of people who are like, I just need to do, what are the words and how do I do it? And I'm like, that's the first place we need to deconstruct. And I'm like, queerness, if you are already queer or there's a queer way of your thinking or being, you are already at such an advantage to be able to think at such an extensive way about things. And I feel like the first thing is when you get that like confirmation from people who are like, no, you're great, babe. You're great. And it's okay if like your brain doesn't work the way whoever the fuck works. And it's okay. Like your shorts are this short or whatever it is. Like it's great. And it's not until you have that you're like, wow, do I not need to be perfect? It's like, no. You just haven't read the right people to let you know that that's not a thing. And then 2, I don't even need that thing to love you.
Yeah, it's very much like queer spaces have been some of the most like unconditionally loving spaces. At the same time, that's not to say that all queer people are just inherently wonderful, unconditional love machines, because you can be queer and a giant asshole.
Yeah. It's so sad, though.
It is so sad. I'm like, we can do better.
We can.
You're killing me a little. Yeah. Like, you can be autistic and an asshole. You can be disabled and an asshole. One time I was pulling into the grocery store and somebody was in like the accessible parking space and they had parked like such a dick. And I was like, how could a disabled person do that?
How could you not care? Yep.
And I just had like a moment where I was sitting in the car and I was like, oh, we're not a monolith.
We're not a monolith. Yeah.
No. And it was like, just because I couldn't get the parking space next to them because of how they had parked. And I'm like, really?
So fucked.
So like, you honestly have the privilege of having the placard that allows you the princess parking. And yet you deny me the princess parking.
Yeah.
But I'm also disabled. I really had to sit there and like reset my entire life concept.
I mean, it's the internalized ableism stuff, right? That how could we, as we're trying to like navigate what it means to be queer in the world and to ourselves, that we're like trying to flesh out some shit. So of course we're going to interact with people who still have a lot of internalized ableism poops in their toilet. We've done more fleshing. Some of us have done more fleshing, or we're waiting for other people to flush. Beautiful.
A courtesy flush, please. Yes. Yeah. So I have found that like the more intersectional a person's various marginalizations, right? So like where queerness intersects with fatness, intersects with disability, chronic illness, neurodivergence. I'm like, oh, these are like the people who get me and I get them because we already have all of these shared experiences.
And hopefully a shared politic, right? Because that even goes back to the piece around like we could have a marginalized identity, but there's no politic around like, well, how are we surviving under capitalism and white supremacy and ableism and all this other stuff? That also like can let us know whether or not we are safe, like with this conversation in queer communities, right? Because you're like, you're queer, but you have no understanding of racism. You're like, not that safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Or people who are like, oh, I'm so grateful that there's cops at Pride to keep us safe. And I'm like, we're not going to be friends. You know, it's like, I hope that you have a very good life and that your queerness is unimpeded. But at the same time, like, I can already tell that there would be a level of like having to bring you into like an educational fold that isn't there yet. It's like I hang out with radicalized people.
Yeah.
Where we're like, yes, community gardens and mutual aid, please.
Yeah. Which I feel like are other queer adjacent things, you know, that you're like, well, people don't care about that, right? People are like, well, just go to work, go home to your family. And some of us are like, no, there's like stuff happening in the world that we should be looking at. Or like, there's a garden, or I'm going to go out and be with nature. Like, that's not really in the mainstream either. And so I also like to think about queerness as like, not just like who we're doing, but like, what are the ideas? What do we do with our bodies? You know, that just like, also not part of the norm.
Yeah. Ooh, that was tasty. I want to like savor this. Like, yeah, not just who we are doing, but what we are doing.
What we're doing.
Yeah. And honestly, like just from a statistical point of view, like queerness saves people because there's statistical evidence that when you respect a child's chosen pronouns, name, gender presentation, the risk of suicide is significantly decreased. And when we try and force people into a closeted life so that they can look normal by whatever normal standards are, that pressure to fit in and to not be different is honestly life-threatening. It's dangerous.
Very dangerous. Yeah. We're watching, me and my partner are watching We're Here. Have you seen this? We're Here. No. It's like Drag Race. It's like Drag Race and Queer Eye together a little bit. Yeah. Very, very interesting. And so they like go off. Fun. Yeah. They go off into, there's like 3 drag queens and they change in between seasons. 3 drag queens go into these different cities to see who wants to do drag. And so there's like drag king and queens. And in one of the most recent episodes, we had someone that was like maybe in their 60s who had maybe forever identified as a woman, but like never uttered those words. And I was just like boo-hooing the whole time to be like, oh my God, that anyone can live a life and feel the need to do that, even in 2024. Like that shit bugs me out.
Yeah, I saw an obituary going around Facebook of this man. He was like a very decorated veteran. And in his obituary, he came out He was like, I have always been gay.
Wow.
I spent 25 years with my partner. Like, I'm gay. Sorry, I never told you, basically. Like, he came out on his deathbed. Like, only in death did he feel safe enough to speak his queerness. And like, imagine if we had a world where he never would have had to keep that secret.
Yeah.
It's, oh God, now I got goosebumps.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the, I don't know that it's balanced, but just like the spectrum of it, right? And like queerness and gender sexuality, the spectrum is also the spectrum of like that kind of experience. And like the people may be like, well, just be who you are. But like, that's not that easy. But also that I'm in a place of like just refusing not to be all of me, you know? And I just so want that for other people because I can't imagine living otherwise. And so even watching that episode and she was becoming in drag and putting on clothes and all these things. And I'm like, wow, how could your life have been different if you could have done that the whole time? But they were like in fucking Oklahoma or something, you know? Yeah. And I'm like, ugh.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even that, right? That it had to come to like someone else where I don't know where any of the queens are from really, but like someone else from another state with a little bit of like fame and fortune or whatever had to come plop themselves in your little town and be like, hey baby, you can be who you are. You know, even that is so queer. That is so queer.
It's pretty queer. It's pretty
right?
queer.
So queer.
It's like the traveling queer caravan of magic.
Right. And even someone may find this episode in a very like I just Googled queer and then this just comes up. It's just like you just don't know. You can't control it.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. I have been working with queer therapists. Like my last two therapists that I've had have been queer men, actually. And I like when I moved to Akron from Cleveland, I was like, okay, let's see if I can find like a queer affirming therapist. Cause I live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of like Trump stickers and flags. And it's very, very Trumpy out there. And I'm like, I don't like this. This is not my favorite. And there's a place like 15 minutes from me where they've got, you know, this is a safe space. All are welcome here. Like rainbows all over the office. I've got a queer therapist. There's probably other queer therapists there, but that's just so important. And I know that my therapist sees a lot of like teenagers as well. So that's where the change happens. Like, yes to people finding their queerness and being able to dress the way that they want everything in their 60s, but also like the youth, right? Being able to like be your full self and have your parents like see you like that and get it. That's so important.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to do foster care for teens, specifically queer teens. Like that's my plan.
Nice.
Because again, like going back to the statistics, like for queer teenagers, if their parents kick them out of the house and they go into the system because of their queerness, I want them to have a safe queer adult. So I just have to hope that I end up somewhere where there's programs in place in the foster system to like help with that. I know Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland, where I used to live, has like a specific LGBT program within their foster care system. I know. I was like, this is very progressive.
Yeah.
19 or whenever I looked, you know, I can only hope that more of those happen because I think it takes like a specific queer home to help bring up a queer teen. They need that. They need to have all of their terrifying hormonal shifts happening without also having to be like, well, am I going to survive this day if I tell my dad that I'm gay? Or if I tell my mom that I'm trans? Or if I tell my teacher that I want to go by they, them pronouns, and because of some freaky legislation, now they have to tell my parents, and then I got kicked out of my house. The landscape is not great.
It's not great. It's not cute at all.
It's not. It's not. Which is like, that's why queerness saves us. You know, if we could just choose to stay straight and stay closeted and stay safe, we would if we could, but we can't because that is itself like a death.
Yeah. That was like a theme that they had like that named that I don't think that I was like thinking about. That it was like either if you just that there's a loss in whatever direction, right? Like we can hope that when you do come out, if you have to come out, or maybe you're like just around queer people all the time, that it's not even a process for you. But then it's like, oh, if you do come out as queer, you're like, you may lose people, right? But then it's like, do you rather lose people or do you rather lose yourself?
Yeah.
Or like, that's so the choice that people are having to make right now around like whether or not I even assert this identity or share it or like whisper it or even write it down. And like, even what you're saying, like, it was like, but I write it down and then someone can find it. Which is like my story, was that I did write something down and then my parents did find it. And I was like, but that was very unconsensual and fucked up that y'all found out. But now here you are, right? And so part of the saving for me was like, well, now I don't have to pretend. Now you know, like a little something, you know? And like, this is not the way. But now we both know, and none of us have to upkeep. And I think that's part of the like, also the freedom of it is like, now I don't have to upkeep a particular narrative or story or image anymore, because that's so fucking exhausting, right? And we know this from like unmasking it. That is shit. It's too much. It's much too much.
Yeah, unmasking like autistically and neurodivergently is so similar to like unmasking compulsory heterosexuality. And as I was thinking about our topic, like how queerness saved me, and I think I wrote this down, like put it on Instagram, but I realized that coming out as bisexual was like the first time that I ever like reflected upon my identity in a way that served no one but myself. Because I could have just stayed in the closet. I could have just stayed straight. Never had to date a woman. Like, I could have just never done that. I'm really glad that I didn't stay in that closet.
Me too.
Yeah. And I'm chaotic and gay.
Look at you.
And, yeah. It's like, it didn't impress anybody. Like, I didn't do that for anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't do it for, I think there's a lot of commentary that there's like a transgender trend. It's like, nobody comes out because somebody like bet them $1 to be gay. There's
no amount of money.
No, there's no like peer pressure. There's no performative anything that could make somebody pretend to be queer. I guess like where's the benefit of that? Being queer is unsafe.
Yeah.
In the world, but very safe internally. People make me upset, Petra.
I know. They do. I feel like that is really important, a key piece, right? Because we live in a world that's like, okay, it's about accolades, about like, okay, what awards did you get? What like achievements and things, and like what level of life are you at, right? And we're just like, well, I'm queer, and like, well, you don't get no points for that. Why would you even tell us? And you're like, no, but I get 100 points for me though, because I was like, the first thing that I had mentioned that was like not about you is what you're saying, and that like was in service of me in a world that's like, don't think about anyone else but other people, right? Don't worry about anyone, like focus on how other people perceive you and the gaze and all this other stuff. And you're like, no, I'm standing on what I stand on. And this is for me. And people are like, I don't like that. No points for you. No cookies.
Well, it's a good thing I'm not doing it for your points.
Right.
Oh God, it's like when men say like, men don't actually like bright colors of hair. And it's like, why did you think it was for you, honey? This is for me.
It's for me.
Like, I've been blonde now for 5 years, 4 or 5 years. And right after my divorce, I went like fire engine red. It was like hot red.
You're ready to change your world.
Yes.
Change your life.
So like, I got my divorce with red hair. And eventually it like, it would fade out as hair does. And eventually I was like, I kind of just want to keep it blonde. And so I would just like touch up my roots and keep it blonde. And now I dyed it like pink again a couple years ago and was like, that's not me. That's not me. I shaved my head. That's not me. I'm really glad that I shaved my head because I've always wondered.
Yeah.
And now I don't have to wonder. And I'm like, no, I'm blonde.
Yeah. I found it.
Yes, it's me. Like I bought a wig. And then I put the wig on. I was like, "It's not me." I'm crying like in my Instagram stories. I'm like, meh, so bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, like finding the way to express yourself, to have words for who you are and what you represent and who you love and all that jazz.
Yeah.
Is beautiful and it is life-saving.
And the permission, right? The permission to get to experiment and iterate, and that like, you're also in a relationship with other people who are experimenting like with their hair, or who they love or how they love. Like, I think about like, I don't know that this is like, this equals the other thing, right? But there's crossover. I feel like overlap, right? With like the overlap you're doing before. There's lots of overlap between people who are queer and then have like these like non-hierarchical relationships and are practicing like, what does it mean? And maybe there's like a friend here. Maybe there's like a lover here that I'm like, just no one told us we could do any of that, right? And so I think part of queerness for me is that it like, and coming into contact with other people's queerness, it just pushes my imagination. And I'm already someone that like feels creative and imagines. And still people are like, well, you know, I have my boyfriend do this thing. And then I also have like a daddy does this other thing. And I have a girlfriend to do this other thing. And I was like, damn, I didn't even think that you could do it like that, you know? And just that's the whole thing. And that, again, I think it's like for people who are used to like we either have salt or pepper, and we're like, but there's also paprika, and then there's garlic, and then there's seasoned salt.
Yeah.
We're like, how many? And I'm like, well, you just got to try it. And the permissioning to just like try out some shit, and then it might not work, but that feels like the point of it. You know, you're like, well, I loved this way before. Like I tried this with my hair. Like maybe I need to bind. I'm like, okay, I don't really like binding. That's the whole thing of it. And I think that's why like other people will be like, well, that's just a phase. And I was like, no, that's experimentation. I'm learning myself. Like
that's humanity.
Yeah.
What in what world are we supposed to just be like, okay, well, these khakis fit, so I wear khakis.
I wear khakis.
That's it. I just wear khakis. Well, fuck you. Maybe you like jeans better. Maybe you want to wear a kilt.
Like, or a skort. You remember skorts? I miss skorts.
Love a skort.
So functional and cute.
Chub rub.
I know.
Yeah, like I'm trying to like figure out my style again, because in my eating disorder recovery I've gained a lot of weight, and now I'm like, I used to wear like a lot of like bodycon dresses, and I would dress like really like fitted, and now I like kind of baggier clothes because I like being like relaxed. And I'm also not trying to like perform my hotness at people. And so I'm just in this weird frickin' spot where I'm like, I feel very comfortable in leggings and a tank top, but then in the mirror I'm like, you look like you're wearing hobo pajamas.
Oh.
And so I don't know, there's some kind of disconnect. I need to go shopping. But even that, like, it's queerness and it's queerness and it's queerness, because it's all about being who you are as opposed to who people tell you to be.
Yeah. And making those like active choices, right? Because maybe I'm like, I do want to be a hoe today. Then be a hoe today, right? And then some other day, like I love those reels that are coming out. Like, this is me as a stud and this is me as a femme. And I'm like, how the fuck is that the same person? And people will also be bugged out. But I'm like, that's queerness, baby. Like that's just, you just get that permission in those passes to be like, you get to look like a hobo today, and then tomorrow you look like a cupcake, and then the next day you're like a fucking unicorn thing.
Yeah. You know what's funny is my brain was like unicorn, and then you said unicorn. I'm like, this is good.
Just good. I tried. Telepathy. Yeah. Also queerness.
Queerness.
We all share one. There's a book that I love where they I think it was the Patternist series by Octavia Butler, who Black science fiction author, and she had people who were like, they shared one kind of brain. I'm like, that's telepathy, just queer.
Oh, I like that. I like that. I've only read Kindred by her, but I want to read so much more.
Got to.
I really liked it. I'm a sucker for like time travel, especially weird time travel that doesn't make sense for anybody else. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's me. That's my novel.
Yeah. Isn't that what you're writing right now? Right?
Yes. I am writing a chaotic, traumatic, family generational trauma time travel novel.
It's going to be so good. Yeah. And the program, and you're doing a program too?
And spec-fic for trauma healing.
So fun.
Yes.
Yes.
Really excited.
Also queer. Also queer.
Also queer. Extremely queer.
So
Speculative fiction is queer.
Yes. Very queer. And I think I did this like trauma healing training program thing, and they had a section on queering your ancestry, right? Because of being queer, and many of us are like need to create chosen families, are abandoned by our families. It also means we don't have lots of connection to our lineages. And one of the things that they had taught us was like, well, you get to invite people to be in relationship with you, right? So if you're like, I want queer ancestry with Audre Lorde, like you get to ask permission for that. Or like, I have Asada Shakur as my baby over here that I'm like, I think she's still in Cuba. Can I ask her to be part of my non-blood over what is it, water, thicker than water phrase, whatever. Like, who is in my queer lineage? That's queer.
Oh, I really like that because I went down like an ancestry.com rabbit hole for a little bit. Yes, because I'm white, I can.
I know.
Yes, because my aunt on my dad's side has like examined our lineage, and like she just traces that back and back and back. So like if I ever need to know anything there, I can just go ask her. But I didn't know anything about my grandmother on my mom's side and back. And I am working on a memoir that is kind of around my grandmother. And I'm like, well, I want to go find out more about this side of the family. And I've been able to trace it back reasonably far. But I did find a slave owner, and that upset me a little bit. I was like, oh, this is, don't like it. So I took a little break. Cause I'm like, I love the idea of like working with your ancestors. But what happens when your ancestors did shit you don't want to emulate or bring forward? Like, I just want to leave you buried. So this idea that I can just go be like, Frida Kahlo is my great aunt.
Yeah. Or even, I think too, right, that just like part of like doing right by ancestors too is like, yo, you fucked up, but how can I make it better, right? Or to give you like also to understand you potentially in context, which I feel like you had a beautiful writing about like understanding your mother in a different kind of way, which also felt like a really queer eye towards a situation where, again, part of the norm is to be like, okay, either you love your family at all costs or they're dead to you, right? And it's like, there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of gray and rainbow.
Like, nuance is queer. Nuance. You're giving me like permission to just be like, that's queer, that's queer, that's queer.
I know.
Everything in my life queer.
Expand it. Because queerness is so expansive.
Yeah. The idea that all or nothing is something that I have like dealt with myself, being like, well, if I reach back out to my dad, like if I make contact with my dad, that somehow undoes the 6 years that we haven't talked because of my boundaries. Well, no, it doesn't. Like I made contact, I took the temperature, and he was still a dick. And so I was like, okay, well, we find out. It's like shaving my head. Like, well, I found out. Now I don't have to wonder anymore.
And you might forget. And then you might do it again in 6 to 10 years, which I feel like is part of the thing around navigating your sexuality too. You're like, well, I think I started out a little bisexual. Maybe now I'm a little bit queer, but maybe now I think I'm pansexual. And they're just like other people who are very intent and have energy and joy around like describing things. You're going to come up with something else. You'll be like, that was actually it. Like it was like 3 parts pansexual, 7 parts. It's like a recipe book. And you're like, yeah, you're just like a recipe book. And there's just bits and pieces of you right there. Yeah. And expect that there's also going to be a quarter cup that you don't know what the fuck that is. And maybe you'll know in a few years. Maybe you won't know, but it still matters. Like it's still there. Yeah. It's still valuable.
And the secret ingredient is love.
Not beautiful. Just put love on it. Just name it love until there is another name for it. I love it.
Yeah. An unconditional love of the self. And also like trusting people to know themselves best.
Yeah.
Like that's what queerness does. Like I know a person whose pronoun is soup. And so it's like, well, Soup wanted to do this and this is Soup's. And it's like, okay, all right, you're Soup. And
Soup.
If Soup ever changes Soup's mind, then we'll change it. But like right now, it doesn't hurt anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people really feel like it's hurting them, which bonkers. And then it's just like, haven't you ever changed your mind? Haven't you ever? But some people don't. Some people are just like, no, like I'm going to dig my heels. And I'm like, but you just got your nails done. Like you're just like ripping them by digging your heels in. Now they're just like all crusty and busty. But you could literally just like, just remove your face. Just unleash from the grand.
Be stuff.
Yeah.
It's very much a letting something be what it is. And letting it be what it is without questioning it and needing it to have an airtight defense of itself. Like the defending is exhausting of being like, well, explain to me what you mean by gender queer. Well, like, no, that's why I'm using the word queer, because it's
it's this hand movement.
It's wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. Like, sorry, it's just queer.
Yeah.
We have, is he,
Just queer.
And then just wiggle it back and forth.
Yeah.
Sorry to everybody listening to the audio only version. You should check out the YouTube to get the wacky waving hand motion. It's a must. So I do want to wrap us up here so that we don't go too long. I'm trying to keep my episodes bite-sized for the ADHD attention span of me and my listeners.
Yeah.
But what are you up to? How can people find you? How are you celebrating queerness, and where can we celebrate that with you?
Well, I love June because it's all about pride. It's my birthday month. It's going to be my birthday on Thursday. I know this is coming out. Thank you. But it's my birthday. And this season, I'm doing a season of unraveling, which feels very queer also, around talking to the peoples about white supremacy culture characteristics. And so there's 13 of them. We're trying to unravel and unwind and be like, okay, if we're not defining ourselves by these like principles of perfection and one right way and either or and all this other stuff, well, then how are we? Like, how are we? And how can we be in community around that? Which like I feel is like in the ground of what we've been talking about, that the community and relationships are really important. And so if you want to come talk about that, I'm talking to people every Friday until like the rest of the summer. So we out here.
Okay. Yeah. And is that on your Instagram?
Yeah, it's in my links. You can find that in my links. It's called Unraveling Me and We.
Ooh.
I love it.
I love that. Look at that. And Petra is at Create More Possibilities.
Yes.
On the Instagrams and all about the interwebs. What else? Any last words? Not in a dead way, but in a...
I know. Do something a little queer today. Whenever you hear this, whenever you watch this, do something a little queer today, even if it's just for you.
Even if it's just going like this.
Right. Just do that. Just see what your hand does.
It's very good. It's very stimmy. Just wiggle your hand.
Just stim. Yeah. What's the thing that only brings you joy? Just do that. Just do like 5 minutes at least. Just do that.
Yes.
What do you have? What do you want to leave the people with?
Oh my gosh. I'm pretty into this wiggling thing.
I know.
My wish for you today, beautiful queers listening, is that you hydrate.
Yes. So that you can do that. Okay.
So you can do this. You can kind of like tell like the hyper mobility, because my wrist is just like a noodle. Love it. Okay, awesome. So go find Petra. Tune in on Fridays all summer to unravel white supremacy. That's pretty rad. And find me doing stuff all the places where you follow me.
Hey.
All right, see you next time.
Bye.